What's up everybody, Arthur here. Hey, happy holidays everyone. I couldn't make it before Christmas like I wanted to, but it's still holiday season. I hope you're having a great end of year with your family and loved ones, relaxing and enjoying some time off maybe. And I really hope you enjoy today's video, episode 3 on the end of year special, the best games of 2022 that you've probably missed, now on Metroidvanias. Do check out the previous episodes. The first one was on Zelda likes and the second one on turn-based RPGs, and stay tuned for several other genres in the next episodes. This selection of Metroidvanias is especially excellent. These are not only good, they're all great, at least the ranked ones. And I'll also feature some early access games and honorable mentions in the end, but I had trouble ranking these games this time because they're all awesome. Alright, that's enough introduction, let's get to the list. Welcome to the channel, this is From the Void. First one is a breath of fresh air on the Metroidvania genre. Number 11 goes to The Night Witch. This is a great game. Like I said, this entire list is incredibly high quality. The Night Witch is a mix of Metroidvania with side-scroller shoot-'em-up, with a very positive outcome. Not too many games do this, so the novelty is refreshing. It is also surprisingly excellent as a shoot-'em-up. It provides a great combat gameplay. You have your normal attacks and also special attacks that randomize between your setup of choice every time you use them. This no doubt adds a positive aspect to this game, but note that there is a sizable learning curve to overcome here. The game demands that you learn each spell very well and even recognize its art in the corner there, and the simple act of looking in the corner to see which spells you have is already difficult during intense fights. And I emphasize the word intense there. This is a tough as nails game. Since the very first boss fight, it is not kidding around. So couple that with the demanding learning curve and you got the recipe for early frustration here, which then leads impatient players to rage quit, which in turn leads to them leaving a very unfavorable review on Steam. So yeah, if you're an impatient player, I would not recommend this to you. Otherwise, this is a brilliant shoot-'em-up Metroidvania hybrid. The Night Witch, check it out. Coming in number 10, we have Astronite. This is a pretty cool one. The graphics will remind anyone of Gato Roboto, but this is longer, about twice the size of Gato Roboto, lasting around 7 hours, and a lot tougher too. It has that Soulsborne idea of removing your currency if you die, which you'll need to improve your skills, so it's going for a bit more of a challenge here, which bodes well for this game, because even though the graphics are minimalistic, it still manages to have a lot of atmosphere. There is also a lot of demanding platforming here, which I enjoyed, but I see some complaining about it online. But Astronite is a pretty solid and not overly complicated Metroidvania that most fans of the genre should enjoy. The 9th place goes to Haiku the Robot. This one reminds me a lot of Kunai. Both are Metroidvania starring a robot protagonist with similar graphics and even color palettes. The combat here is simple. Haiku has a sword for melee attacks, while dodging and other skills will make him overheat. This is a little frustrating because he overheats really fast and it takes too long to cool down. But the overall feel of the combat is great, with a lot of fluidity and creative enemy behaviors, which are the major positive of this game in my opinion. The AI, both regular enemies stages as well as boss fights. This makes the game pretty tough, and dying removes half your currency, which you need for upgrades, but you can reduce the penalty with equipments you find. The exploration aspect is also really strong here. There is a lot to discover, a lot of branching paths, but it keeps everything too obscure. For instance, you need to find specific machines that are jamming your map and destroy them to be able to see each area, and those machines are sometimes really well hidden, so you'll get lost a lot in this game. There needed to be a better sense of direction here in my view. This is not necessarily negative. If you're in for a tough challenge on both the combat as well as the exploration, this is a fantastic game. The 8th place goes to creepy, weird and awesome Zapling Bygone. This one is weird in all the right ways. You are a creature that belongs to a hive mind trying to absorb every creature's consciousness into its own, and you are doing its bidding, so you go around murdering creatures left and right, plucking their skulls out of their corpses and wearing them. Yeah, that's the objective here. Pretty awesome. With every new school comes a new ability, like clinging to walls and double jumping. Each school has also a set number of slots with different shapes in which you can fit the badges for several enhancements. And Zapling Bygone has a fantastic Metroidvania aspect, with many different ideas thrown into the mix. It's pretty interesting. The atmosphere goes for a creepy, eerie vibe, never becomes horror or anything, but there are plenty of dark and damp places to explore, all fitting really nicely with the weird story too. I really enjoyed this one, another great Metroidvania from 2022. Next is one that I covered in my top 50 upcoming Metroidvanias. It came out this year and I am happy to say it's a great game. When it launched though, it had a few major issues, but those were mostly fixed by now. But we'll get to that. Coming in number 7 is Souldiers. This game is definitely the best looking in the list in my opinion. I love pixel art and this is exquisite pixel art right here. It also plays wonderfully well, mixing a deep Metroidvania style exploration factor with lots of puzzles and an excellent battle system with skills you build up yourself by leveling up. Your defense and dodge have cooldowns, so you'll need to really learn the enemy's patterns in order to succeed, especially in the later part of the game, which can become too much for a lot of people, and that was the major complaint it got at launch. But they pretty much solved that issue by allowing you to pick the difficulty, and on normal it feels great, while still presenting a tough challenge to overcome. The game is rather long too, lasting over 40 hours if you go for every nook and cranny, so this is not a game to play with a casual approach. Souldiers locks you in to the class you choose in the beginning, and they are wildly different, to the point of being inconsistent. The game changes drastically depending on the class you choose, but that's by design, and I think it's a positive, providing an insane replayability aspect here. The last issue is the Switch version. I don't own it, I have it on Steam, but apparently even after the latest patch in December 2022, it still lags, has long load times, and frame rate issues, which is crazy for a pixel art side-scroller game. I ran into none of these issues in the Steam version though, so either wait a while to grab it on the Switch or go straight for the Steam version. I loved this game, so I can guarantee that if you like a challenging Metroidvania and played this on Steam, Souldiers is a wonderful experience. Moving on to number 6, HunterX. HunterX's only flaw is the lack of originality and maybe some of the animations, that's it. Other than that, the game is fantastic. Everything is surprisingly well polished here. The Metroidvania exploration aspect is well made, with a lot of branching paths and interconnected screens, but never feels frustrating. The combat is the absolute highlight, especially in the enemy's patterns, with some really interesting, clever and creative ones, and also in the skill tree and equipments, with a lot of room for personalizations of your weapons and accessories without feeling overwhelming or convoluted at all. Those two aspects combined result in just the right amount of challenge for a seasoned Metroidvania fan. The enemies are tough to beat, but the game provides you the tools to do so at all times. It's fantastic. This is a really well made game. It may look generic at first and it doesn't innovate in any meaningful way, but it's thoroughly enjoyable. Next is definitely one of the bigger highlights and a different take on the Metroidvania genre. Number 5 goes to B.I.O.T.A. B.I.O.T.A. Okay, this is a pretty cool game. In terms of novelty, this is really up there. B.I.O.T.A is a really fast-paced Metroidvania, and each screen is very tiny, which goes well with the graphical style, the really low pixel count, and the 4 shades color palette, which you can change, by the way, to a huge number of options. Pretty neat. I always enjoy when games do that, and the gameplay almost feels like a Mega Man style game, with how you traverse through screens, but make no mistake, the Metroidvania aspect is here for sure. It just goes about it in a different way, which I appreciate. It starts off like a just advance to the next screen kind of game, but soon opens up to the areas with many branching paths, and what it does differently is the blocked path aspect. For instance, in the first area you find a passage to another area, but it's filled with radiation, so your guy can't enter. Neither can any of your several characters, which you can switch between in town, and each with a different main and secondary weapons, another huge positive in this game by the way, but none of them can withstand radiation. You need a robotic character. You soon find out that you can buy one in the first area store, but when you get there you find out that the robot costs 350 bucks, but your wallet can only carry 100 bucks. So you need to find 3 more wallets. There is one wallet hidden in each area. So that's the incentive to explore here, and it feels completely different. It's pretty cool. There are many other types of hidden things like new characters and even machines to ride on, which change the gameplay and pacing nicely. This is a great game. I got addicted to B.I.O.T.A. This ended up as one of my favorites for sure. Try it out. Next, grabbing the 4th place is Haunting Ghost Song. This one is impressive, especially in tone and atmosphere. And if you're an avid Metroid fan, you know how important that is. Ghost Song goes even beyond the dreadful, oppressive environments typical of an alien game like Metroid. It manages to achieve terrifying feelings. The sounds the enemies make are really scary. At all times, you're hearing some creepy creatures making the weirdest sounds. You have to play this with headphones. It's amazing. I mean, check this out. Yeah, and it goes well beyond that. It's pretty awesome. Gameplay wise, the combat is pretty cool. You have a melee and a ranged weapon, and you will need to use both, because the gun heats up after 10 shots or so, making the fire rate slower, but on the other hand, it heats up your melee weapon, which will cause significantly more damage. And that's a brilliant logical reason to force the player to use both kinds of weapons. I loved it. The enemy AI is well made, with many different types of behaviors, all contributing to their nightmarish weirdness and posing quite a challenge. There is a strong Soulsborne aspect here on the boss fights. They can feel overwhelming, but learning their behaviors is part of the fun. The only problem I had with the game was with the platforming. Your character jumps very awkwardly. It's hard to get the platforming controls. It took me a while, but eventually I got it. The other complaint I saw online was with the backtracking. There's a lot of it. It's a typical Metroidvania thing though, and I didn't mind it, especially because of the optional boss fights. Some bosses roam around the world like you do. You encounter them in an area randomly, and if they beat you enough times, they just move on to another place. And there are many of them, so you're bound to run across these. There are some of the best fights in the game, and they grant some of the best equipment too. Ghost Song is a mesmerizing game in many ways. I loved it. If you like this kind of engrossingly terrifying aspect in games, this is a phenomenal pick right here. Then the bronze medal goes to HunterX. HunterX is probably the better known on the list. It's a side-scroller Metroidvania that meshes two styles of gameplay from two different games together and reinvents them. The locations are grim and eerie like a Castlevania game. It even has the day and night cycle straight from Simon's Quest. It features a lot of nods to that game too, but on the other hand, it gives off a Zelda 2 feeling to the combat, with the need to use moves like your crouched attack and be mindful of enemies doing the same, as well as other abilities inspired on Zelda 2 like the down thrust. Some skills are also used in the platforming, which can be very challenging in some sections. The Metroidvania here is another highlight, in large part because of the setting, which gives off a really brutal middle-age vibe. The theme of religion and faith is very present, giving locations an even more sinister tone, and on top of all that comes the morality conundrum system with two options for dealing with each problem you may face, and those are not black and white choices, which makes them engaging and pretty cool. This is a fantastic game with a lot of secrets to discover, and they just released a DLC for it too, which I still have to try, but do check out HunterX if you haven't yet. It's a pretty awesome game. The second place goes to a game that absolutely deserved a lot more attention. This is Hack. Hack looks gorgeous in my opinion, especially in the animations. It plays wonderfully well with emphasis on both platforming as well as combat. The boss fights are challenging and creative, and the exploration is awesome with some real sense of discovery, clever hidden places, even mandatory ones, so exploration is a real strong aspect here. This is an awesome game, a 9 or 9.5 out of 10. The only reason I can think of why this is obscure is because of the sheer amount of other games bearing it down. That's it. The only issue I had was with the translation. It's kind of rough around the edges, but other than that, Hack is a fantastic Metroidvania and the second best of 2022. Now, before revealing the winner, let's take a look at the games that came out in early access in 2022, beginning with Lone Fungus. This one is all about platforming. It definitely got a lot of inspiration from Hollow Knight, as it focuses a lot on the slash downwards mechanic that causes you to bounce off of enemies, spikes and other things. And I gotta say, if you like a platforming focused Metroidvania, this game is already pretty impressive. Even in boss fights, it still focuses on the platforming. You will have to move around a lot and use the mechanisms you unlocked, which are plenty and provide interesting gameplay ideas. One of the earlier ones will allow you to create a little thing that you can bounce off of, which really adds a new layer to the gameplay. This is a great game right here and has high potential to become a fantastic one, even though the graphics are simple. Lone Fungus, check it out. Next is for sure the most humble on today's list, but a surprisingly creative and fun combat mechanism in this one. HunterX, the Honest Elf. Okay, the graphics here are very basic, alright? It's probably a one-person or very small team making this game, and graphics are very secondary to me, but I can definitely see it being a turn-off to a lot of people. The game compensates on the gameplay though, truly. Your little guy can learn new elemental abilities, and each ability will require you to do some directional inputs with the right analog stick in order to cast them. The combinations are always here on the right side and the inputs down here. I know it sounds like a nuisance, but actually translates to a cool challenging gameplay, especially in boss fights, because you can stop the combination at any time and resume later. For instance, you can press up now, dodge an attack, and then press down R2 to cast the Thunder spell, which allows you to summon a powerful thunder up to 3 times. You can even have several spells active at the same time. The boss fights here though are really hard in the early access build at least, so be advised, and the Metroidvania aspect doesn't receive a big focus, at least so far, so I can definitely expect this to be not too attractive for a lot of people, but the game has serious potential. And the final early access game is one that I made a preview video of recently. That's Frontier Hunter Ezra's Wheel of Fortune. This early access build is incredibly chunky, it's almost 10 hours long already, but clearly there is a lot more to come in the final version, which is great because I enjoy the early access very much. The best thing about Frontier Hunter is the Metroidvania style exploration. Most screens are wide with multiple paths to take, the enemies are incredibly varied, which is a huge plus, and it always feels rewarding to explore. Another great aspect that needs no improvement is the combat. There are 3 characters to control, you can switch between them on the go, and each has access to unique weapons. The combat feels fantastic, it's fluid, responsive, and satisfying. You have a wide variety of moves, and the way you use them is pretty cool. It's like a fighting game. You have to perform specific commands like a Hadouken or something like that. There are tons of items, armor, and weapons to collect and choose from. You can also craft new equipment and cook recipes, where eating will increase your stats temporarily, and for all that you need to use the hundreds and hundreds of items you can find, giving plenty of reason to go out of your way to defeat an enemy or even grind a little. The game still needs some refining and polishing, but the core of it is definitely in the right place, even with some parts where it deviates from the main gameplay with shooting sections to break the pacing. So yeah, all in all, Frontier Hunter is definitely shaping up nicely. I'm eager to see the rest of it when it comes out in full. Let's get to the winner, but note that I still have some valuable honorable mentions after that, so don't close out of the video yet. The first place goes to beautiful Eyelets. Eyelets got some notoriety, but way less than it deserves, I feel like. The previous game of this developer, Shippo, got much more mainstream attention, I think. And I'm really not sure why, because this game looks lovely, right? Very Studio Ghibli-like. Colorful, cozy, wholesome, and gorgeous. I would have expected it to turn a lot more eyes. The story is interesting and sets a great backdrop for a Metroidvania game. You're trying to reconnect the many islands that compose this land back into one so that life can return to normal. The exploration through these islands is definitely one of the best aspects of the game. You have plenty of freedom to move around, including between the islands, which you do by driving this lovely little airship. During this section, you can find the town, where most NPCs are found and where you buy improvements to your skills, but that's not all for the airship section. You also have boss fights here, where the game becomes more of a dodge 'em up bullet hell than anything, and I gotta say, it's a fantastic change of pace. The exploration is on point, with loads of secrets to find, and counts with great platforming mechanics too, which makes Eyelets strong in both platforming as well as combat. Your little mouse guy has a satisfying dodge, as well as bow and arrows, and several other abilities you unlock that are all great to use. So yeah, I mean, this entire game is tight as a drum. They nailed it. I can't see a single reason to dislike it, so I'm happy to give it the first spot on the list. Eyelets is a fantastic Metroidvania. Now, to close things off, a couple honorable mentions that for one reason or another I didn't feel like I should rank against the other games. Beginning with Crazy Moolander. This one is in the honorable mentions because it's not much of a Metroidvania. The exploration aspect exists, there are some closed off sections and a big map, but there is little to no branching off and backtracking. It's quite linear. But the game is super fun and all sorts of crazy. You control a spacecraft and your main enemies are cows. And these are Martian cows, from what I understood, and we need their milk for some reason, so you gotta defeat them in combat with non-lethal weapons to capture them. And against everything else, you use the regular ones, making the combat rather interesting, as boss fights also have regular enemies. The game is voiced over, which is a plus, but the humor is not the best. The gameplay here is where it's at, with many different abilities and the need to replenish your energy, which you do so by standing in these pods here. Yeah, Moolander is a lot of fun, and it got no traction at all, I think. It deserved much better. Next is Tomomi. This one is a very humble game, at least in the graphical department. It's very simple, kind of underwhelming even, which is why I don't want to rank it against the other ones. But the price is also humble and the gameplay is solid, really solid. Tomomi is fast-paced and all your abilities feel great to use, especially towards the end where things escalate a lot. It starts off allowing you to become a dog, which controls pretty different, then later changes your main weapon to a huge ass axe. It is loads of fun. The game is pretty well balanced too, and the exploration also feels great. The downside here are the character models, the story, and the dialogues. Very cringy and unenjoyable. Play this only for the gameplay. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed and discovered a few interesting Metroidvanias. Do check out the other episodes on Zelda-likes and turn-based RPGs, and stay tuned for the next ones on several other genres. If you appreciate the channel's mission of covering obscure games that deserve more attention, do consider joining the Patreon, as I'm yet to achieve sustainability with this channel, so any help is much appreciated. Alright guys, happy holidays. If I don't see you again before the year is over, happy new year to you all and your families. Thank you so much for all the support this year, I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.